The Standard Bank Young Artist Awards were established in 1981 to celebrate emerging South African artists who live their personal truth through their art and talent in their chosen medium. In 2022, Lady Skollie won visual arts at the Standard Bank Young Artist Awards. she etched her mark on the art scene with provocative and meaningful works. She joins me now in the studio for more insights on her work. Lady Skollie, appreciate your time. Congratulations on winning the Standard Bank Young Artist Award for Visual Arts. How has this recognition impacted your artistic journey?
One thing I really love in my art career is recognition. And I think the highest level of validation for an artist is definitely to win something as big as Standard Bank. And it was actually something I committed myself to winning when I turned about 12, I think. So, yeah, I think it's invaluable what it's done for me and what it's done for my career.
Grootegat explores the concept of brown identity in South Africa. How did you tackle that, and explain to us how it manifested in your art?
So I would say it definitely speaks to being brown in South Africa, because I'm brown, and I think as an artist what you have to do is always see yourself reflected in society and see your work reflected in such. But I do think that overall, Grootegat is about more than just the brown experience. It's about anyone whose past or history or traditions or rituals were strategically erased by everyone that came before us or before democracy, because there's a lot of people that just don't know or don't care where they're from because it's too painful to think about those thoughts or those histories and those memories. And so Grootegat is kind of how do you define yourself when you're defined by a void or by an omission or by a not knowing. So I think a lot of people can relate to that, not just so-called coloureds or so-called Bushmen or the brown people of South Africa, but anyone who's felt that feeling of not knowing within a South African context.
Grootegat means the big hole.
Yeah.
So how does the big hole manifest in this whole piece? And how did you come up with it, actually?
So I based the Grootegat, obviously Kimberley's is called the Grootegat, or the big hole, where you get diamonds and important things out of. But I had heard of a place in the Northern Cape, in Kimberley, and it's called Bushman's Hole. And it's like this freshwater hole that Bushmen used to fish in, and that's now, since the land was taken and stuff, it became kind of this place where people would challenge nature, so they would jump into this hole to free dive and see if they can get out to the other side. And I kind of thought, what if going into a hole or going into a dark place that's uncomfortable could take you to a place where when you come out the other end, it's a place where you're not defined by oppression, or your identity is not defined by a heaviness of sadness. So that's kind of where I was going with the idea of the show, Grootegat.
Now, the one thing that you do with your art is you use crayon, and it's been described as a childlike way of doing stuff. Speak to us a little bit more about that.
I love crayons, I love ink, I love any medium that we used to use as children and that we kind of forgot. So even things like paper mache or you know, when your kids come back from kindergarten and they're making stamps out of half a potato, you know. I like things that memories are locked up in, and I think for me my medium is very hard and fast and now and spontaneous. And so using something as tactile as crayons and wax, it just goes with my practice.
Now, part of your exhibition to 6 to 12-year-olds was, in fact, aimed to break down barriers. What are these barriers that you're breaking, and how do you achieve it with your art form? I always think that South Africa is very lucky that I want to be an artist and a painter and not a politician, because I think I'd actually be really good at it. People love to follow me, you know. People love to listen to the things I say. But I find art to be a very great medium to relate to people. It's such a disarming thing. I always tell people my mother paid like 50K a year to put me through university to study art, but she would always feel uncomfortable to go into a gallery. And the previous disposition, or the previous people that ruled this country, made a very big divide between us and art. And understanding art, whether it's opera, whether it's music, you know. And so to make people understand that art is for everyone, it invites people to be part of a world that was previously just reserved
for not people of color. I don't want to say white, because then people feel attacked. But so I use the gallery. I use the gallery as the place for people to congregate and for people to really talk about the work and talk about what they see in it. Art is a very therapeutic thing, and part of the problem with it is that it takes you very long to start. But once you get into it and once you make it a habit, you can free your mind in so many different ways. And so I think art is just a very cool way for us to connect to each other and to disarm each other and not feel so formal. You know, everyone's like, we should go for therapy, which we definitely should, but art is a nice
we should probably paint and draw. We're talking a little bit about, in fact, we're talking a lot about art before we went to the break. And you mentioned earlier about how your mum spent 50K a year putting you through art school, but wasn't able to go into galleries to enjoy this art.
Yeah, I think fine art has been, they put a wedge between us and art and try to make it as if we don't understand it. But how can you not understand something a child can understand? Art is something that's for everyone. And so even when I finished art school, my mother still, she wasn't into it. She would feel uncomfortable in the galleries. And I wouldn't say, you know, I wouldn't give myself...
Why did she feel uncomfortable?
Have you ever been to a gallery? Sometimes it's stressful. You get there, they want to give you wine. You sometimes just feel like you don't belong there. But I think that in my living memory, and I'm not even that old, I'm 36 years old, but in my memory, there was a time when art didn't make money, or when people would try to box you in and say that your art isn't African enough, or they would want you to kind of show the white idea of black art, which would be, you know, township scenes or tavern scenes or just things that people would assume is what we would paint. And I just think we've come a really long way in the past 10 years to the point where people are investing in art, you know, people are collecting art for the first time, and it's fun, and I'm glad I'm here for that ride, you know.
So what's our idea of black art then? If we've had this shift from what was a white perception and white creation of what art should be. How have we owned it? Because there are a lot of black or brown artists now, or people of colour that are famous, that are doing magnificent well across the planet. That's
a really good question. I think that how we've made it our own is that black art, or so-called black art, is about identity politics now. It's about showing people parts of our identity that we weren't able to before because of apartheid, or because of we were divided, or segregation, or whatever. Someone actually made a comment on one of my Instagrams, and she said, why are brown artists and why black artists so angsty? Why are they always talking about all the sad stuff? And I said, because we weren't never allowed to talk about it. And so I think if you wanted to kind of put black art into a box, which is not good, but if you were to do that and you would ask yourself, what are people really making art about right now? I would say they're doing it about their own identity and how they perceive themselves and what they think of themselves and where they belong in this very complex society we call South Africa.
Does it still allow them to make money or to earn a living? Because obviously if it's stuff that was, if it were previously marginalized, and so was the nature of the content that we're creating, we're not creating stuff that was supposedly hidden or swept under the carpet. Are the people, which predominantly aren't black, that are buying art, are they buying our art?
So we kind of divided on this. I would say that there's sometimes collectors find nothing more delicious than black pain. And so it is a tricky balance to keep, you know. Where do you pander to the collector that just wants to be reminded of why we are the way we are, you know? I also think it's a common misconception to say that it's only white people collecting art. The actual Johannesburg Art Fair is run by a man of colour and by a team of colour.
Not only, it was like there's a predominance. So whilst it's there might be black and white or white and people of colour, but there is a predominance in who buys art.
Yeah, because I think they've had a longer history of understanding how to make it work for you, you know. People collect also for very selfish reasons, you know. They collect so that they can resell when the artist makes it big, or so that they can get a tax break. These are all things that are a pro to business owners when collecting art. But I think when you are someone of color and you collect, you kind of have a more of a sentimental way of collecting. And so you're not always collecting just to resell. You're kind of collecting with your heart and not your head. And I think that's what makes us different. We collect art that we love and that we want to see and that we want to see in our household and we want our children to see. And so I think that's what makes our collecting a little bit different than, you know, just buying things for your restaurant or your mansion at the coast.
So,
sorry.
So diversity in the pieces that you paint, draw, or produce. Is that a reality? And is it a reality because there is what the commercial buyer wants to buy, which is not necessarily a reflection of your life, but you also want to earn a living.
Yeah.
So do you find that artists like yourself will put together pieces that speak to your life, and then obviously put together pieces that will actually sell?
Very good question. Again, every time I've tried to... I've never allowed a gallery to dictate to me what to paint. The funny thing in South Africa is I was never represented locally. I was always represented in Europe and in England first. And local galleries weren't really interested in me. They weren't really interested in representing me. And the woman in England eventually told me, oh, well, you know, I think you should do something a bit more sexy, you know. You don't have to do things that are so heavy and always about hate and dividing us and whatever. And I think... I made a decision very early in my career that I wasn't going to be dictated to. Because you can do the thing of painting what sells, but then you're stuck in a loop of making the same thing over and over, or your style will get stuck into a loop.
Does that not give you an audience, though? Because if...
No, it's because you see art as a product and not as a byproduct of a feeling. Art is not a product that it's not Woolworths, you know. Someone actually once asked me for a refund, and I said, girl, this is not Woolworths, and I blocked her. Art is not a product to sell. I just understand how to sell it. And so maybe it seems to you like I'm,
So let me put this to you in a different way.
Okay.
Right. I'm going to use Lewis Hamilton, whom we all know, who's a Formula One star.
Yeah.
Now, Lewis Hamilton has been able to push an agenda that speaks to his many beliefs, one of those Black Lives Matter, because he is recognizable, right? Now, he wouldn't have pushed the same agenda before he was one of the world's greatest F1 drivers, because even if he did, nobody would have listened to him.
Yeah.
So my question is this: if you paint these pieces that they want to see in the West or elsewhere, does it not allow you an audience? Because then people are clamoring for Lady Skollie and who's she about? And that then allows you a platform to then do the very pieces that speak to you, your past, and how you feel and how other people of color or brown people feel.
I think that, no. I think people respect my opinion because I don't necessarily... well, let me put it like this. The point of art is to reflect what is going on in society. So Lewis Hamilton being a driver basically copied us because artists have always just been speaking about what's going on in society, what challenges us as a people, what challenges women, you know. Within a South African context, fine artists have and always, and I think will always, be talking about what challenges us as people. And so it's cute for him to speak up, but mostly Formula One is probably a million times more of a privileged area than fine art, you know. It's a rich man's sport. But with South Africans, you get people who paint in anything, and they say very expensive. Well, it's a perceived value market, right? So I could paint on a giant piece of paper, and it could go for 200,000 rand, but it's more about what the collector or the person that loves the art feel about it or perceive about it than what it really is. You know, I think there was a phase when artists was doing things like bronze sculptures and, you know, but that plays into the normal person who doesn't know art's idea of what things are worth. And I think also it's valid because, wow, things are worth a lot right now, even food. I guess so there will always be the question of why must the art piece be worth X, Y, and Z? But I think it's because it really is.
Lady Skollie, it's been absolutely amazing. Thanks so much for coming into the show. And congratulations again on receiving that Standard Bank Young Artist Awards.